Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Java in the Cloud. Today, I'm here with Vadym, and Vadym is an AWS hero. So, for a long time, he's been working with the community, helping everyone learn about AWS and Java, as well as one of his areas of expertise. So, I'm really looking forward to talking to him a lot about serverless Java, and how people can learn more and understand how it works more. So, Vadym, do you want to give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, of course. Hi, Mark. Also, thanks for having me in your YouTube show podcast. Yeah, as you told me, my name is Vadym, and I'm quite old in the industry, so more than 25 years. But basically, working with Java later. I mean, it's just 2018, 17. We started working with AWS on migration to AWS for the certain reasons for the product that we have. Soon we more or less kind of discover is the wrong word. Just we saw the benefits of serverless. Maybe we can talk about it a bit later. And just it was a good fit for us to adopt serverless first mindset. We don't only have serverless workloads, of course, also standard, classical, Dockerized. But we saw a lot of benefits, but of course underestimated certain things due to the complexity of distributed systems. But nevertheless, if you can do it right, if you have the right environment, I am still the believer. And yes, Java on serverless became more my personal topic because we struggled as we started 6-7 years ago. The technology was not there, completely wasn't there. And in case this so-called startup performance mattered, there were no solutions, real solutions. But I persisted, yeah, and with the help of you and the community. So yeah, AWS pushed the right things, the community pushed the right things. So now we have a better place if somebody would like to start doing such a stuff. And yeah, like everybody now, I'm looking into Gen AI stuff, and there is a Spring AI looking how that might help. Also, Aurora SQL is interesting from the perspective that we have a relational database for truly serverless workloads with
Yeah,
certain limitations, of course, but it's just the beginning, and it gives us more choice. And this is also quite interesting. Maybe we will be talking what are the impediments of the Java on serverless, then the SQL seems to solve them with
yeah.
different trade-off. But this is part of the discussion. So this is a kind of area of my interest, and I'm blogging a lot, sharing my knowledge. I'm quite active in the community. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that leads on to, I think, a topic that a lot of people be interested in. So I think, was it last year that you became an AWS hero? How did that come about? How did that feel? What have you been involved in since you've been hero?
So it feels great. It's kind of community recognition. And this is something, maybe it's kind of important to be seen and viewed as an expert. But of course, I personally don't know how this exactly happens. So the best thing one can do is simply to contribute from the heart. And I would say contribute from different angles. For me, it was public speaking, sometimes later blogging and a bit of social network work. Others may organize events, may be involved in things like YouTube channel, open source project. This is what I don't do, but you cannot do everything. There are so many dimensions. And I think if you are persistently contributed from the heart and there is a value that you provide to the community, that it might be the case. There is no guarantee that people on AWS side, developer advocates, solutions architect see you, and how exactly the process works. Nobody knows. There is no self-nomination and all that stuff. You will be notified when it happens like this. Yeah, and of course. I'm happy, but for me nothing changed. I don't think I contribute less. I cannot promise that I can contribute every year as much. There are certain private things related to the job, and you need to kind of jungle that. But this is, yeah, it gave me the opportunity maybe even to contribute more because due to certain benefits, I have more contact to the teams on AWS and can ask direct questions, and they lead to ideas to try out
Mm,
block and give them feedback, which might be considered or not. So this is kind of, I see as a bit as a win-win situation for me.
yeah, so that's really exciting. And to talk about having more access to the teams, I think when this video goes out, you'll have just come back from the Hero Summit in Seattle. Is that right?
Yeah, I came back several days ago. I'm, of course, heavily under NDA, and that's why I cannot share anything on some roadmaps or discussions. But of course, it's also very good opportunity to directly engage with AWS people because it took place in Seattle, at the heart of AWS. And of course, I, for the first time, met many people in person with whom I had contact. For us, it took 5-6 years to meet for the first time last year in Manchester. Yeah, it's just sometimes we are quite near, but that should be some event which brings us together, either speaking activity or some kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's just quite interesting discussions, and I'm quite happy that the heroes will have, of course, don't have any impact on the roadmaps, and so, but our feedback is desired, and we give them a huge bunch of people. The feedback is multidimensional. People are interested in different services or stuff working, and I think that's kind of also amazing that something like this is organized. And it's also nice to see other heroes and organizers of that such event. It's a massive, and if you see the whole brain power in one room with completely different perspectives and sometimes even tough discussions. Not everybody is kind of, yeah, sometimes we are unhappy with something. Yeah, and we are talking publicly and openly about that, and I think that's fine. And just to see the people that you
Yeah.
usually see at only at reInvent, sometimes on the YouTube, like it's sometimes, yeah, it's also kind of the sign from AWS that people with VP roles and so on join the discussion, share their ideas, and yeah, that's
Yeah. You said that it doesn't really affect the roadmap, but I think it probably does. I think, you wouldn't bring all those people together and ask them their opinions. So I think maybe, maybe not directly, but I think indirectly, probably very influential. So that's super cool. And yeah, I'm really glad that you're a hero. I think your perspective from a developer's mindset, I think, is really crucial. And I hope to listen to you. So
yeah.
maybe we could just I guess change the topic a little bit. So you mentioned your company, started using some serverless. Obviously, I don't think any company is entirely serverless. It doesn't always work like that. But maybe tell me a little bit about, why you saw benefits from using a serverless approach, and where maybe it didn't work, and how you decide about where to draw that kind of serverless line.
So of course, it's sometimes difficult to describe because sometimes it's simply cultural and influential. And this is something how it started. We came heavily from the having many data centers with time to purchase and all that stuff. And we are heavily in the Christmas business where we have 10x certain days, and if we need more, then we cannot wait. Yeah, Christmas season is over, and if the people cannot purchase, and we are dealing with photo products like calendars, photo book of the year, people are doing that stuff, especially in the Christmas season, photo book of the year, something. And there are, of course, campaigns going on. We are in the white labels. We are doing the product for many customers. And that's why, of course, there's a huge responsibility. If it doesn't work, the whole chain of unsatisfaction is
Yeah.
is, is a huge one. And that's why is kind of the first migration to the cloud lowered this barrier to launch new instances, and it was kind of fresh air. Today it's normal, but people with certain experience will still say it's good thing to have. And of course, everything becomes utility over time, like electricity, and we say it's always been like this. No, it hasn't been. But the serverless lowered even for us, like we started to look, and we have heavily developers, less system administrators, and just to be able to do something from prototyping, from idea, just to putting it live, to launch, is just this lowered completely. Just it's been days, sometimes even hours. The possibility without too much knowledge of stuff beyond, and of course, yeah, that was kind of the idea that we can deliver quickly. And of course, yeah, serverless, it works perfectly as long as the architecture is good one. But of course, if it grows, then you are hitting some stuff which is
Yeah.
normal and distributed system. The complexity grows, observability stuff becomes harder.
And that's, I think, where
Mm.
a lot of people maybe don't have the experience in distributed systems, which is totally fine. Not everyone comes out of education or self-learning knowing everything, and that's not to be expected. But there's a different set of things that you need to know running everything on one machine, and then scaling horizontally into many machines, but then also bringing in new resources like databases, clusters of databases, read replicas, queues, topics. I mean, it's just another set of things to learn, but that's just how
Exactly.
we grow in the industry.
Yeah, that's right. We started with local project kind of for not for the customers, but like self-service tools to learn that. So if we would jump into something complex for real customers, then we will probably we'll need to roll back quickly something because we simply underestimate this. Yeah, we had the time, and of course, it's important to have a time for learning. And we also started right away with DynamoDB in certain teams without having any experience with a NoSQL database. And of course, you cannot design it right from the beginning. And 6, 7 years ago, the knowledge sharing, the amount of information was a bit lower than now. Now you have much more access to the stuff and you can ask. So I think we as a company were even pioneers with the serverless stuff, at least in Europe. USA it was just a bit different, but just 2019, something around this. It still been early days of that. And of course we made our mistakes, but I think the developers love that because they are the owners, or the team is the owner of the whole stuff. And of course, everybody has its own points that they know better or less, but I think that the difficulties were not kind of a problem, but just to learn, understand, improve, but you need to reiterate. It's just easy to start with 1 or 2 Lambda functions, but if you have 200, the story might become just serverless. Distributed systems are hard, but serverless is even harder because there's so many services, Lambda functions. It's just so tiny. Yeah, we can start with a big ball of mud, but this is another discussion. Yeah, you need proper APIs and just understanding of that stuff. So
Yeah, there
needed
seems
to
to
learn.
be
Yeah,
a high correlation between people who are interested in domain-driven design,
exactly,
making sure that um, applications are well formed, that there are clear boundaries,
exactly.
APIs, ownership on which team owns a particular thing, and if that team then wants to have more smaller functions or less bigger ones, that's a decision that is made by them because of how they want to work. And I'm very much of the opinion of empowering people based on the skills that they have. There's downsides of having lots of individual things to deploy, that you have to manage those deployments. But if that's something that you have a skill in and that you want to do that because you want to have a smaller blast radius, that might be suitable for your use case. And it is having sensible conversations with people who are experts in their area and working out what a sensible approach is. It would be nice just to follow one approach, but that's not reality.
Yes, of course. I mean, serverless forces you to automate everything. It generally cloud forces you, but sometimes you can click. With serverless, you cannot click. It's just you need to understand what can be deployed together, what cannot be, and you cannot click sequentially. And that's simply, it forces you to follow some best practices. Not all, but at least from that point of view. And the idea, of course, that you can have staging live, even personal feature branches for pennies with serverless. If you're truly serverless, if you just start RDSs and all that stuff, that might become different. But with a standard stack, you just don't pay anything,
Yeah,
basically. Yeah, and this is even in fresh account, you will be probably hitting the free tier all the time. And it's just to test before you push even on staging and complete the complete environment. Even it's a superpower.
yeah. I think back on my career, even just having environments that were the same size and capacity as
Exactly. Yeah.
production was quite rare. But now we take it for granted that we can just deploy very, very
Exactly.
similar.
Exactly, or very near, yeah, because we test on test machines without load balancers, and that was normal. But it's not one to one. There is no certificates, and then the
Yeah,
things look differently. Here, you can replicate sometimes exactly the
yeah.
same. Yeah, and this is,
It just
of course,
reduces a whole set of bugs that no longer occur
yeah.
because of these things. Yeah, I look back and wonder how we did anything. I guess that's just
So my
progress.
my wa- my mother was software developer back in 1670s. Started. She's not there, but she will wonder probably. The world was different. The complexity were different. There's basically was small console programs that she did, maybe with some small interface, but the complexity grew and we needed to manage it somehow. But I think the tooling is progressing. I mean, CI/CD is standard. Jenkins is standard. 15 years ago, it's not been the case. Everything, yeah, just JUnit, yeah, maybe, yeah, or unit testing, but the kind of infrastructural stuff, this DevOps movement, I think it's improved a lot, not only for the cloud, but in general.
Yeah, cool. So when you were first talking, we mentioned something, and it very much resonated with me, that when a lot of people started using Java for their serverless functions with Lambda, it was just horrific as an experience. And I can definitely remember multiple cases where customers were speaking to me about 30-second timeouts for cold starts. Is that when you were starting to use Lambda as well?
Yeah, it was the same experience. I think 20, and I even used Spring Boot for no reason. To be honest, it simply was easier to copy something or some framework. It was just to think how it might work. Yeah, and was one of the reasons that we had Java on serverless, but for asynchronous workflows. It was easier. We had this knowledge, but to be honest, we needed to rethink it in our work, and the whole stuff is basically written in JavaScript and then in TypeScript for the lambdas, because we needed to decide 6 years ago, basically, how to proceed for the latency sensitive workflows. And unfortunately, Java wasn't there, and net the same. So all that languages with virtual machines and then all that stuff was that need time to start. They are more optimized for like web applications, which may take several seconds, but they run then forever sometimes. Yeah, that was of course the thing, but I personally persisted because Java is such a popular programming language in the enterprise, and of course I hope that the solution will appear, because it's also for the cloud providers a big cake. If you lose so many developers, Java developers on Lambda, then it might be also not a good thing, and we see this change.
That's what I'm really passionate about. Is that I've seen how many machines these enterprise applications run on, and from me, it would be so beneficial to have them running on a multi-tenanted system like Lambda, where all of this carbon can be saved, all of this efficiency can be saved. And instead of having these, very idle machines apart from, office hours, that, these things can be really made much more efficient and much more cost effective. So that's like really hits for me and really improves things. So what sort of things have you seen over the years that's really helped improve performance for Lambda? Because I know you've been doing a very popular blog series where you've worked through a lot of the different examples.
So, of course, GraalVM is there for 5-6 years. If we will be talking about SnapStart, it will be 3 years, I think, in November. And of course, GraalVM was there, but I also saw that the adoption of that was slow. And I was also wondering, you see GraalVM talks on every conference, like the developer advocate Alina Yurenko, also coming from Ukraine, everywhere, like. But if I talk to the people, do you really use it? I heard people from Twitter, and so that they used it because they used Scala, which was slow. They needed to optimize that, but it was not even on serverless, so they used simply GraalVM. And it's nothing wrong. It has been massively improved, and it gives you very stable startup performance, even with a lower memory. But of course, there is this complexity. CI/CD is on your side, and it takes 6 to 10 gigabytes to build such a native image, and also minutes. What depends on the machine, and sometimes you need it in parallel, and you need to be sure that your application is GraalVM ready, that there are no reflection happening, or where you can say I need those classes from the beginning kind of and reflect JSON, because it's ahead of time compilation. And of course, sometimes you don't control the whole stack. There are dependencies, they bring other dependencies, and something might break with a minor version. So there are still issues. There are pages published which framework were tested, but sometimes you use something on top as a dependency, and it's very easy to break this stuff. So you need extensive testing here, and it doesn't feel a bit like I would like just that it's quick. But GraalVM adds it's just another VM. It's just not managed Java. With that, you need custom runtime on Lambda to put it live. And personally, my expectation was, it worked, but there have been cases. My expectation was, or I would have vetted that AWS will bring something like managed GraalVM to Java. But it turned out just that SnapStart with Firecracker VM snapshot and restore was the solution. Maybe you know better why that way was chosen. You have that insights. I don't have them, but I really liked it. Yeah, so you
Yeah,
can.
I really like GraalVM native image for when you have an application with a discrete small operation where you have a minimal set of dependencies and you have something that is important enough to dedicate a lot of time and effort into it where the performance is really key. So I always think back to a large bank that I worked with who used GraalVM native image for a Lambda authorizer for their company-wide API gateway. So this API was hit a lot. It was the gateway for all their applications. The authenticator obviously had to be very fast. It had to meet a latency target, and the authentication was quite a discrete piece of work that wasn't going to change a lot over time. So they were able to really have the time to focus on that use case and make it as optimal as possible. And I think you can't discount the memory reduction. I think that is incredible, and it's something
It's
that really,
pricing dimension.
yeah, and it really shows with when you compare like Java and Rust. And there's a great DevOps Belgium talk by a guy called Ishai Galetza, where he did a Java versus Java versus Rust talk. And
I saw it.
basically, the performance is about the same, but Rust uses 8 times less memory, and you can see that very much in GraalVM native image as well. I mean, the
But for me,
memory is amazing.
there is some burden to make it work for the first time because you need to find all this stuff that will be accessed per reflection, or you need to run this tool. There is now the tool which can generate everything. You need to just incorporate it into the test phase, but it's also kind of wasn't the case for several years. But once you have that and the dependencies are kind of stable, then it's easier next time. Basically, yeah, this is sometimes for me why I really liked SnapStart. It was easy to start. You can simply just checkbox and it's managed, and people sometimes understand what's exactly managed. The whole snapshot creation and storing is just that's the whole burden, because with GraalVM it's on you to store that custom runtime and manage that and delete all those old builds. And this was sometimes we take for granted things that are very hard to implement, to be
Yeah.
honest. And this is kind of you have significant improvement only by those checkbox first. Yeah, already maybe 50-60% depending on the use case, but sometimes even more. If you would
Yeah.
like to have more, you have then
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's one of the things that I really liked about SnapStart, that it's a very low bar of entry. And if you want to add more expertise and do more, you can do. But as soon as you click that box, you're already getting benefits. And I think what you said about people not always fully understanding how managed the solution is really interesting when you read a blog article or a workshop article about how to implement snapshot and restore with containers, and you have to go through all of the steps, to make a snapshot, and then you have to think about where you're going to store the snapshot. And obviously, the snapshot of your application may have secrets in memory, so you have to encrypt it. The storage has to be fast. It's actually an
I
amazing solution.
I try to make crack work. Coretta is not crack aware GVM, so I needed to go via Docker where I could do that stuff of GVM from Azure, which does it. But many people just don't see that the benefits, because to do a snapshot, I need to run it somewhere, and for the first time make the snapshot, then provide that snapshot for the subsequent executions, and do the same for each time I change the Lambda function, for each Lambda function on each environment. And it's a huge amount of work. And I think that AWS solved it with that the snapshot is taken during the deployment phase, which is
Yeah.
one-time stuff that they do. Start the container as the cold phase, and they started somewhere else. It's not impacting any life. It's a huge benefit. And now people are talking about, the project laden will come. So yeah, that's fine, but there are the same problems. This class data sharing, it's all some kind of snapshots and restore. Doesn't matter what is beneath, but how it's need to be incorporated in the life cycle of Lambda, of Azure function. And if you do it on your own and the cloud provider doesn't help, I don't see too much value.
Yeah,
It's just too much work for me.
I think, wouldn't it be interesting if you could take the capabilities of Lambda snapshotting and provide that as a capability to a container platform and have the same sort of restore storage and restore mechanism to a container platform? I think that would again solve another interesting gap in the market.
Yes, of course, because Crack is limited to Lambda, but the problem or the challenge is in the microservices world as well. The other containers also need to spin up quickly. They come and go now with that elasticity. Of course, we have here Crack and Warp, which is, I haven't tested that, but that should be even quicker. I see the blog post from Sascha Möllering, living in Germany, who is very interested, especially on the container side of the things. Things improve, but we are still talking about 5, 6, 7 seconds. Yeah, it's just it's not what you will get with Lambda and SnapStart. But of course, it's bigger on the container side. But of course, it also depends on the snapshot size. Yeah, on the small Lambda function, the snapshot is also small. In the container, it can be bigger. And of course, restore time depends on the snapshot size. Yeah, so we are naturally having that lower. But of course, being able to use maybe the same technology across AWS will help, because yeah, even with Crack you are bound to certain GVMs. There is a Bellsoft one, there is a Azul one which supports Crack, but for example not Corretto and not all official. Yeah, but maybe with the project laden there will be something like that can be harmonized and even be portable across cloud providers. But I don't know if the cloud providers have interest to standardize stuff.
Well, cross our fingers.
The
That'll be
community has interest. The cloud providers sometimes think differently here. Yeah.
Fantastic. If we move away from the performance talk for a little while, I think another thing that caught both of our eyes a few months ago, I guess now, was the remote debugging for functions. I know that you wrote a blog about it. What were your thoughts about the feature when it was launched?
Even remote debugger or async profiler? Because I think we talked about both stuff.
Now let's start with the remote debugging.
I think it closes a bit of experience, because it's remote debugger. So I debug the real function on the cloud side. So it should be the same environment. And of course, people say I would like to test locally, and you can test certain things locally, DynamoDB and so on, but you can't test SQS, you can't test IAM permissions, and you can't test SnapStart. And with that, I have more or less natural experience. I can put the breakpoint and see maybe there is some error, something is not restored. I don't have any permissions to call something, and the services which are not available, at least not easily available. There is a local stack that offers you more, but you need to pay for that additionally. Not everybody does that, so that just gives the possibility basically to do this remotely, which sometimes help. It uses Java debug wire protocol, the standard protocol for doing such stuff. Sometimes this UI, yeah, you see all that Lambda functions, and I have 200 of them. Sometimes it's difficult to navigate what I would like to debug. But I think that for me, what matters is the functionality is there, and these plugins that may improve over time. But I see that there's certain situations where I need exactly understand the behavior in the cloud and not locally might be the case. Even if I'm test DynamoDB, which I can test locally, DynamoDB local doesn't support all this throttling stuff and all that. Yeah, and sometimes it's
The
just
volume of data or
yeah,
the
it's just
specific data. Yeah, I've not used it yet, but I'm glad that it's there, and that if I did have an awkward situation like security permissions or something like that, I know that it would be a lot easier for me now to go in and have an exact understanding of what was happening. Whereas before, I think, I'm pretty experienced with AWS, so it's easy for me to kind of try and think through a problem. Whereas I think now that I know that it's there and available, I can just remote debug it and probably come to the same conclusion with a lot less hassle. I mean, I'm a developer who leans on my debugger a lot. I'm not a great programmer, so whenever something goes wrong, I just immediately jump into the debugger and find out what I've done wrong. I'm quietly optimistic that another area which used to be difficult is definitely going to be easier now, which is really cool.
And I'm personally happy that AWS invests in such a things. Yeah, that this in-console experience, I see it's increasingly sometimes a fork of Visual Studio or something like this that the people say it's not too much functionality, but it's still better to have that as nothing.
Yeah, and that is the typical AWS process, isn't it? That they always release early and then develop more and more features based on customer
Yeah,
feedback. So if they get feedback that people want it in IntelliJ, then I'm sure it'll happen in IntelliJ. So again, fingers crossed. And then maybe the last thing, and it sounds like you're very interested in this, and I've been following the progress, is Spring AI. So yeah, what in particular about Spring AI is something that you're interested in?
so to speak broadly, I'm interested in agentic AI, but also how the Java will be positioned there. And this is kind of also currently my message to AWS, because that its agent core is released with example how you can basically deploy your agent on runtime, which is serverless environment, which is very close to Lambda, also based on Firecracker micro VM, and yeah, which gives you the possibility just to pay as you go for running this type of applications where we talk through natural language and agents with bunch of tools or whatever. And for me, I already see all examples are in Python, like Python, strengths agents, LangChain, all that stuff. And this story reminds me like Java on AWS Lambda. It's just forgotten. And that was my message. People, no, you release something in this agent core runtime. It exposes basically post invocation endpoint. You can deploy the agent on each possible programming language, even, yeah, not even open source framework. It can be, and I'm currently working on bringing Spring AI there and talk to this, and it works. I already see, but the message is not there. I think it's just Python. Yeah, and that's why it's just currently a bit of working to make aware. I'm learning Python and even block now with examples in Python because it was easier for me. And there are examples out there, but basically you can use Spring AI. You can even use LangChain for J. Rod Johnson, the father of Spring, now has Babel. Yeah, so
Yeah,
we have things coming there, and I see AWS does that. James Ward is very active doing this stuff, but also others. But there should be a more message, because then the Java community will be left over for AI, or at least even not aware that they can do it on AWS. And this is something interesting because I see the rise of the things is sometimes overhyped. I don't think that every application needs a natural language interface and all that stuff, but
no, but probably every application does need to be assessed to say, could this benefit from some sort of AI integration? And that's where I guess I'm really interested in. And I think that, again, echoing back what Rod Johnson says, is that Java is very much the language of integration, it's the language of business. And I think there is a case where people, should, not just look at what is the next task to deliver, but how should the applications that we make sit in the business world, and can the business benefit from a much different way of working? Because these are all going to be things that come up in the next year, 2 years, 5 years. That there's going to be a whole different way of working, and
for sure.
what we're doing at the moment will undoubtedly change, and it won't all be natural language chatbots, but there will be improvements and simplifications in business processes, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, this is really exciting times because you can exposing things via MCP, and large language models became so powerful that you basically have one entry point, and then the framework can figure out what tool to use, and they can be exposed different processes, different applications as the tools. And of course, it's just sometimes it's easier to talk through natural language as provide sophisticated UI UX for putting the things. Yeah, so it's lots of challenges: security, accuracy, predictability. But this is starting. Yeah, I I also see that will change how we work. I think there will be more work to do, but of course there will be wipe coders and there will be people who will clean up that mess, and they will probably earn double as much, something like this. But there will be, it will probably generate even just, there will be more things to do. So we will find our place with our knowledge. I'm quite sure, but it will change the whole economics, how the companies work, and we need to be prepared for that because we cannot stop that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we need to adjust. We need to think where it makes sense to go. Because if you look now, three years back, where not even ChatGPT was released, what has happened in these 3 years is tremendous.
Yeah, and earlier we were talking about, data centers and capacity in data centers,
Uh,
and then the cloud came, and capacity is very easy.
mm,
The pace of software delivery and how we deliver value to business using software is only going to get faster. So that's, and maybe in 6 months' time we can have another chat about how we've introduced AI into applications. I think that'd be a really interesting talk.
Yeah, I think I see so many talks where there are hundreds of tools interoperate. Just start with one, start with two. I don't know how the LLMs work if you just give so much choice. This is like a person. If I can select between two things, I just work well. But if I need to select in the shop between 10 things, I got stuck. Yeah, I just cannot. And I think LLMs will be similar. So just start small, not try to overthink, understand how one tool may work, even two, and just go through the. Sometimes I see the demos and it's a bit too much sometimes because maybe you cannot understand what's going on in those
Yeah.
systems. But it's how the industry hype is always there. We had that hype everywhere with cloud, with serverless, with containers. Now it's AI. But I think there will be things that will go away. Like 7 months ago, nobody knew about MCP. Now it's just everywhere. There will be something else, probably better, because it evolves simply. Probably it's ongoing discussions. This is where I just told to the people there is no sense to write book about AI because it becomes outdated before it's printed out. It's just the pace is amazing. The things now become even available, runnable even on local PCs like Olama. So we will see that it's the cost optimization will kick in. Currently, pricing is tough. Latency is also tough. But yeah, it always starts like this, and then we will see just to make it enterprise
Well,
ready.
Vadim, it's been amazing talking to you. It's always fun. Hopefully, we'll bump into each other in person at a few
Yeah.
events this year, maybe next year. And if you've liked this conversation and enjoyed this sort of topic, then please give me a like and a subscribe on YouTube. And we'll see you again in the next episode. Thank you, Vadim.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me.